Good morning. Thanks for coming out today. It's a cold, chilly morning, so we appreciate you getting out of bed. I had a hard time getting out of bed this morning, so I think my thermometer said 10 degrees. But you know, this is New England, and we're supposed to be hardy folks, so thank you for showing up. My name is Paula Kastner. I'm one of the co-founders of Seven Bridge. I was wondering, are there any folks here that this is your first Seven Bridge event? Oh, welcome. We love new people. Makes us very happy. So, yeah, Terry too. So Terry will be videotaping this morning. So just so that folks know, this will go on the public cable stations. So SLC TV, Sterling-Lancaster, so that you're aware of it. I don't know how many folks actually watch them, but you know, that's what will be happening with this. So as I mentioned, for folks who are new, Seven Bridge Writers Collaborative, we've actually been around about 7 years now. We saw that there was a hole for writers, that people in Central Mass really couldn't connect, and as those of you who write know, writing's kind of solitary. You know, you're sitting in your room, you know, typing or writing, and so we wanted to provide opportunities for folks to gather, to be connected, to be encouraged, but also, you know, to provide good workshops and classes that wouldn't break the bank. There's a lot of wonderful resources that are out there, like Grub Street in Boston, and I highly, you know, I encourage you, you know, if you've got a chance to do something with them, go for it. But for some of us who don't want to drive into Boston, don't want to look for parking, you know, and whose budgets are a little bit tighter, we wanted to offer some opportunities. So our events, 90% of them are free. The Saturday workshops are free, our creative writing groups are free, our critique groups, open mics are free. We do occasionally have classes that we do charge, but we try and be extremely reasonable. So for example, Richard actually, what has it been, 4 years now? 5 years? He's been doing a fiction essentials class every fall. It's a 10-week class. Everything you need to know, and it's been very popular. We've gotten great reviews from everybody who's been in this class. It's 10 weeks, 30 hours, because it's like 3 hours each week. We just charge $150. I mean, it's basically $15, you know, a week. You're not going to find that anywhere, and so, you know, we try and be extremely reasonable, you know, to offer these opportunities for writers. So we also, the Saturday workshop, I want to just mention, next month is on how to write people in fiction, you know, characterization. That's a really important topic, so I'd encourage folks to consider attending. I'm reading a book right now, like 50 pages in. I am bored out of my mind. I can't figure out how it got published. It's part of a series. It has an interesting plot, but I finally figured the reason I don't like it is the people are so flat. There's like 8 characters, and I can't tell the difference between 8. They keep popping in and out, and they all seem exactly the same. And you know, we've gotten a little bit of information about them that's been told to us, but none of their personalities are coming through. And so I'm not even sure I'm going to finish the book, but you know, it's recommended to me. But you know, characterization is really important. You know, even if it's nonfiction. You know, if you're writing people, you need to be able to do it well, so I'd encourage you to put that on your calendars. The other thing in March is on the 26th is we have 6 open mics in here, and the next one is March 26th, and that one will be at the Littleton Library. The one we just had in February, we had 18 people. It was awesome. It was so much fun. It's a great opportunity to hear what people are working on and just to connect, so I would encourage folks to consider putting that on your calendar as well. So a couple of things. We are a nonprofit, 501c3. As I just said, we try and bring things to you for free, but that doesn't mean it's always free for us. So a lot of the workshops we actually, you know, have to pay folks. We have lots of folks like Rich who are extremely generous with their time and just want to help other writers, and they're willing to come in and don't charge us a fee, but others need to make a living, and we want to support them, and we want them to have a living, and so we do pay them. So everything that we do have to pay for, we only do through generous donations from folks who want to pay it forward. So, you know, I do have a basket back there if you'd like to consider donating to Seven Bridge, especially if you've been enjoying all of our free programs. It would be something that would be helpful for us so that we can pay it forward to other people. So this morning we are delighted. So Rich Marcello here is published author. He has 4 books now and a 5th one coming out. Or,
yeah, that's right. That's right. I actually probably have copies of the 5th one.
Yeah. So I've been told by folks who have read a lot of Richard's work that they are amazed at how marvelously he does women. That, for a man, that he really gets us. So, so only for that you might want to get a book just to see for yourself.
I can't possibly top that, so I'm going to leave now.
But this morning he's going to talk about the scene, because everybody knows, our writing, the building blocks are scenes. You write a scene and then another scene and another scene, and they all work together until you have a beautiful story. And so today he's going to walk you through what makes for a good scene, how to write a good scene. And so we would encourage folks, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. And I'll turn it over to Richard. He can tell you a little bit more about himself, and we'll get the workshop going.
Okay, great. Thanks, Paula. Good morning, everybody. How are you? What I thought I would do first is just kind of go around the room. So if you could introduce yourself and tell me what you're working on, that would be great. So, Apara, why don't you start?
Apara, and I've taken his fiction class. I've learned so much from Rich. I'm working on historical fiction in the 1st century, I think. Novel, obviously.
Vanessa, and I'm working on just getting back in the habit of writing.
Cool.
I'm Molly. I'm also getting back into the habit of writing, and a new story idea is just forming, which I'm really excited about.
Great.
I'm Bobby, and I always have at least 6 or 7 things going at the same time, but my major project is what my critique our critique members and my workshop members are calling a novel, which I'm sort of getting used to that word.
Cool. Did you have another word other than novel, or no, that you'd like to call?
No, I was just sort of writing a story, and that's what they started calling it, so I'm trying to get comfortable with it.
I see.
I like it. It just scares me.
Yeah, it's a good word.
I'm Joyce, and I'm writing a short story that explores the Chiligat Alaskan Indian community and their moieties and afterfall from the Nome, Gold Rush, 1910, 1911.
Great. Hi.
I'm Renee, and and I've always liked writing. I don't always do it, and I have had no training, so I take all the free training I can.
That's cool. Hi.
Hi, I'm Jody, and I'm writing a novel and children's series.
Great.
Hi, I'm Jill, and I mostly write memoirs right now, but really what I'm working on is I'm a herbalist, and I have a lot of training in emotional healing, and eventually I want to write about that.
Great. Wow, more folks are coming. Hi.
Hi, I'm Amy, and I am beginning a portal fantasy novel.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I'm David, and I'm just finishing up a work of historical fiction.
Great, thanks. And who are you?
I am Ray, and I am working on historical fiction.
Great. Okay, and I'm Rich Marcello. I've been writing full-time for most of the last decade. I actually have 4 novels out, which I will tell you about in a second, and 1 book of poetry. What we're going to do today is go through this document, and it's basically how you write a scene and how you think about it at a high level. And it's going to be a session where you all participate quite a bit, and hopefully we'll actually have a lot of fun doing it. We might break into groups, we might not. We'll see how it goes, depending upon how people feel. So I published 4 novels. The first was The Color of Home, about 2 26-year-old people trying to figure out if they want to end up together. They spend 6 years doing that. Second is The Big Wide Calm, which is about a singer-songwriter who spends a year with a guy being mentored, puts out an album, and also becomes an adult in the process. The third is The Beauty of the Fall. And this is about the polarized society that we live in, and about a guy who kind of loses everything and then basically builds things back up again and tries to correct some of the stuff that he's seen going on. This fourth book is a book of poetry. People laugh at this book because it's a book of poetry about being a good man. And so most of the women that I talk to say, give me that book, I want to give it to my husband, or I want to give it to somebody else. So, and most of the men say, why the heck did you write a book about that? And then this book, which is coming out April 21st, is called The Latecomers, and it's about aging in America and about ageism in general. So anyway, if you are interested in any of those, there are some at the back of the room later on, and I will give you out little book things, you know, and cards as well. So, all right. So everybody has this document? Great. Okay, so if basically you walk away with one thing from this particular session, it's that all novels are built from scenes. So you just write a scene, you write another one, you write another one, you string them along, and at the end of it, if all goes well, you have a novel, okay? And all scenes start with something called a triangle. And so what you have on your first page here is the triangle, okay? And the triangle has 5 major components to it. It has something called the inciting incident, which basically gets the scene going, gets your overall story going. Every novel has to have one, every scene has to have one, and we're going to show you an example of that in a little while. And then what a lot of novelists do not do well, at least initially, is this kind of rising portion of the triangle, where we're basically adding a lot of conflict, we're adding obstacles. Instead of going in a straight line, we like to zigzag, we turn. Did you have a question?
Is that called the arc?
No, the arc is a little different, yeah. So there's an overall arc of a story and how a character might change from the start to the end. And when I get to the last slide, I'm going to show you something called value shifts. And value shifts are all about how you change within a scene, but how you also actually change within the overall course of the novel, okay?
So were you saying no zigzags, or what were you saying?
I was saying that a lot of people will just go in straight lines in their novels, you know, and so you can almost predict what's going to come next. And it works much better if you have something called a turn. So I'm going to show you an example of a turn today. A turn basically is just the way it sounds. You're headed in this direction, and then you go this way, or you go that way in an unexpected way, right? And then most scenes should have something called a crisis, which is essentially just the question. And the question is typically a yes, no type question. Will the hero die? Will the villain die? Yes or no, right? And then the climax is actually, does the hero die or does the villain die? Whatever it might be. And then you typically go down this side of the triangle into the resolution phase, where kind of it resolves itself for at least this particular scene, and then you move on to the next scene. Okay, so we're going to go through these 5 in a lot of detail as we kind of go through this session, and I'm going to give you a hopefully fun example of working on that, and then I'm going to ask you, when we're done, to go work on a scene of your, basically take this scene that we just went through and write the next chapter. Okay, so hopefully that will be a lot of fun. All right, so yeah, go ahead.
Another word came from high school. Is it the resolution, the denouement?
Yeah, that's right. Most people don't like to use that word, so, but that's what it is. That's what it is. So I just use resolution. So it's like, if you prefer that, that's actually, strictly speaking, what it's called. So, yeah. Okay, so any questions at all? And we're going to get a lot of clarity on the triangle as we get into the details. But any questions so far? Okay, so we're going to need some volunteers. So, page 2, version number 1. Can somebody just read version 1? Any volunteers? Would you like to try?
Sure, I'll take the short one.
Take the short one. Very smart decision.
A father and his daughter, out for a Sunday walk, pass by a cave. A monster comes out of the cave. The end.
Okay, so what's wrong with that scene? Just about, besides everything.
You don't care about the parents, the people yet, because you don't know them at all.
You don't know them at all. That's right. What else is wrong with it?
It's telling, there's no showing.
There's telling, there's no showing, there's no action. Right. What else?
No resolution.
No resolution. No real conflict. No crisis, nothing. So if you actually look at the first page, and you kind of look at this example of version 1, it doesn't do any of those things, any of those 5 points at all. Right? It has some interesting possibilities. A father and his daughter are out walking, but we don't really care about them. And a monster kind of comes out of nowhere. That's got some interesting possibilities, but nothing much happens. Okay. Now, I cannot tell you how many scenes written by folks who are writing for the first time actually read like this, where nothing really happens in the scene. And so one of the reasons to teach scene writing this way is that it really makes everybody think about the triangle and think about making sure you have those 5 elements in your scene. And not only in your scene, but then in your overall book. Okay? All right, somebody want to read version 2?
Jack Jones and his daughter Anna pass by a cave on their regular Sunday walk in the park. A gigantic, hairy green monster comes out of the cave. Even from a distance, he smells like rotten eggs.
Okay, so how does this, is this one, first of all, is this one better than the last one?
Yes.
Okay, and how is it better?
It makes you interested in the monster.
Okay. Gives a little bit of detail. We now have names, right, for our protagonist and his daughter.
You can smell it, you can see it.
Yes. Which is actually one of the main points that I want to go through here. So it's a little bit better because it's specific, right? A scene should always start with who your point of view character is. So your point of view character is basically the person who is kind of seeing everything that's going on in the scene, right? And in this case, it's actually Jack Jones, right? The other thing here is that scenes are really good when we use as many senses as possible. So in this particular scene, instead of just using sight, which is kind of a common thing, right? We're using sight and smell. But really a good rule of thumb for any scene is to try to use at least 3 senses. Right? So you pick whatever 3 you like. Almost everybody kind of gets the sight part right. A lot of people forget about smell, a lot of people forget about taste or touch or whatever it might be. But if you walk out of here and you say, okay, I'm going to write a scene, and I'm going to write that scene with using at least 3 senses, that's kind of a good rule of thumb. It'll just make your scene come more to life. Okay, let's go on to version 3.
Jack Jones and his daughter Anna pass by a cave on a regular Sunday walk in the park. A gigantic, hairy green monster comes out of the cave. Even from a distance, he smells like rotten eggs. The monster races out of the cave and scoops up Anna with one arm. He takes her back into the cave. Jack Jones runs away and doesn't look back.
So what's what works?
Beauty of the Beast.
Yeah, really. What works well about this and what doesn't work well about this particular scene? So one thing I forgot to mention at the last on version 2 is that they're going on their regular Sunday walks, right? Which is actually critical because before you typically have your inciting incident in a scene or in a story, it's good to kind of understand how normal life looks for your main characters. So normal life in this context looks like, hey, they go for a walk every Sunday, they go in the park, it's pretty nice, it's a loving thing, they, father and daughter are having a great time. And then what's changing in our story is that, oh, they're now seeing a monster, and the monster has now just taken the daughter. Okay? All right, so now it's better start, right? Because we now basically have something interesting in terms of the monster taking the daughter, which, would you say that's an inciting incident or not? Yeah, it's the inciting incident, right? So it's the thing that happened that is going to change their normal life dramatically, right? Potentially dramatically, okay? But then what goes wrong with it? Other than the fact that he's a coward, but
No relationship development.
no relationship development. So what else?
Well,
It
there's
just
no
ends.
twists and turns.
No twists and turns, right? We lose the opportunity for conflict because he runs away, right? So one of the main things you want to do is put your characters in conflict with other characters, and you want to present obstacles for your characters going forward. Right? And so what we've done here is we've set it up reasonably well, where there's plenty of opportunity for obstacles and plenty of an opportunity for conflict, but we blow it because basically Jack runs away. Okay? Who would like to read version number 4?
Jack Jones and his daughter Anna pass by a cave on their regular Sunday walk in the park. A gigantic, hairy, green monster comes out of the cave. Even from a distance, he smells like rotten eggs. The monster races out of the cave and scoops up Anna with one arm. He takes her back into the cave. Jack follows after them and goes into the cave. The monster roars at Jack. Jack, terrified, runs out of the cave.
Okay, so how did we move the story forward between version 4 and version 3?
Get a tiny little bit of conflict, but.
Yeah.
Much.
So he goes into the cave, right? So, but what allows the conflict to basically dissolve?
Because he runs away again.
He runs away, right? So one of the important things in a scene is that when you actually put your character in conflict and he takes a step into the cave, it's best that he doesn't have any way to backtrack, right? Because that ratchets up the tension and it ratchets up the conflict, right? And what happens here is that, the monster roars at him, so he basically turns around and runs out of the place. So it gave him an escape valve, which he chose to take, right? And therefore the scene dies right as soon as he chooses to take that. Nobody's going to want to read a scene like that, right? Because basically they want to see what happens to the daughter. What everybody wants is for him to go in and save the daughter and kill the monster and get out, right? But if he runs out of there before any of that conflict has happened and there's any obstacles at all, other than what we've seen so far put in the way, not much. Okay? All right. Now we are going to, there it is. Oh, there it is. Thought I lost it for a second. Okay, version 5. Who would like to read version 5? Go ahead.
Jack Jones and his daughter Anna pass by a cave on their regular Sunday walk in the park. A gigantic, hairy green monster comes out of the cave. Even from a distance, he smells like rotten eggs. The monster races out of the cave and scoops up Anna with one arm. He takes her back into the cave. Jack follows after them and goes into the cave. A steel door closes behind Jack, trapping him in the cave with the monster. The monster roars at Jack. Jack takes out his Glock and fires all of the rounds at the monster. The bullets drop off the monster like they were pebbles. The monster throws a rock at Jack and knocks him out.
I'm glad everybody's enjoying that over there. Okay, so how did we advance the story in this version? What happened that was an improvement from version 4? And then why does it fall apart?
There's no escape.
That's good.
He puts up a fight.
He's knocked out.
He tries to put up a fight, but what does he do when he puts up the fight? He basically...
He appears with a Glock.
He happens to have a Glock, which, you have to kind of give me a little bit of poetic license here that he just happened to have a Glock, but hey, but why not? We'll go with it for this class. But then he fails. And he also fires all of his bullets. It's like once the first one kind of dropped off, it was like, maybe I shouldn't fire anymore at this point, right? So it kind of takes a little bit of tension out because what else is he going to do, right? Whereas if he had just fired one, then maybe some other way might work, maybe not, but we don't know. We'll find that out as the scene advances. Right. So this is an important point about wherever you have an opportunity to hold back a little tension and then use it to build, that's a good thing to do. Remember, the triangle is going up, right? The slope here on the long part is going up. which means that the tension and the conflict at the beginning of the scene has to be smaller than the tension and conflict when you get all the way up to the crisis and climax, right? If you basically got up to the crisis and climax right away, right, then it would be kind of, wouldn't make a lot of sense to go back and have conflict that was not really at the same level as the crisis and climax before.
So what about the story is where you know who did it at
Yeah.
the very beginning? So how is that tension?
Well, I think in those kind of stories, the tension is about exactly how that person ended up doing it, I guess, right? So it's all about building that way. So you choose to give away the ending of the who did it, right? But then there's suspense in trying to figure out exactly who or why. A lot of times it's about a why, right? So,
That's true.
right, and so the scenes then become about really understanding why somebody did something all the way up to the final piece where and sometimes, like a good example of that, if you read Gone Girl, for example, right? So it's like she kind of starts in the middle, and it's like, exactly what the heck's going on? And she's reading, the woman just basically writing in her diary, and she sounds like this wonderful person, right? And then it turns out that's not true about midway through the book, but you don't know any of that because you're basically trying to unravel the story. And so it's kind of a misdirection thing where you think one thing up front, and then it kind of evolves, and you think something different.
What was the name of that book?
Gone Girl, it's like a classic example of something like.
You're dropped in the middle, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So then, what else is wrong with this scene?
Well, all the action stops because Jack's knocked out.
Yeah. It's like it's not very fulfilling, right? When your hero goes in, he's trying to save her, he can't get out, he fires all of his bullets. Kind of cool. Then the monster throws a rock, and it's like, end of the scene, right? What's going to happen now, right? Kind of terrible, So it basically devolves before we actually have any real crisis and real resolution, because we already know kind of what the crisis is going to be, right? The crisis question is going to be, does he save his daughter and kill the monster, or does the monster kill him and kill the daughter? That's basically what it's going to come down to, right? And we all know how we want it to end, right? And so we want it to build that way so that it kind of moves in that direction, and then we have to decide if it actually ends that way or not. Okay?
Well, also, Anna's not doing anything.
Anna's not doing anything. That's true. That's true. All right, version 6. Who would like to read version 6?
Jack Jones and his daughter Anna pass by a cave on their regular Sunday walk in the park. A gigantic hairy green monster comes out of the cave. Even from a distance, he smells like rotten eggs. The monster races out of the cave and scoops up Anna with one arm. He takes her back into the cave. Jack chases after Anna and goes into the cave. A steel door closes behind Jack, trapping him in the cave with the monster. The monster roars at Jack. Jack takes out his Glock and fires around at the monster. The bullet drops off the monster like it was a pebble. The monster drops Anna to the ground. Jack thinks she's terrified, but she's also trying not to cry. The monster rushes towards Jack. Jack fires the remaining rounds at the monster. They have no effect. The monster picks Jack up off the ground and throws him at the wall, knocking him out. The end.
Okay, so how is this better? How is it still lacking?
Didn't fire all the.
Didn't fire all the rounds, so it's the same result because eventually he fires them all, but we string it out a little bit. And it's because we string it out a little bit, it increases the tension a little more. Not for long, but just enough to keep somebody saying, well, he's still got 5 bullets. I wonder what he's going to do with those other 5 bullets, right? And then he basically uses those 5 bullets. What else did we do in this particular version?
We know more about Anna.
We know more about Anna, right? And so, we're doing this in 10 versions, 1 page per version, so we're not going to know a lot more about Anna, right? But it actually is a very important point that we kind of know something about Jack. So far he's been kind of a coward, though he's getting a little bit better, right? So, and now he's kind of chasing after his daughter. But now we're getting one little tidbit about Anna, right? And I think as you write your scenes, you want to think about who are your primary characters, right? And how much you want to reveal in the scene about their character. And you want to do that through showing what they do as opposed to just saying, oh, you know, Anna's a brave little girl. Here we're actually seeing her, the look on her face as seen from Jack's point of view is that it looks like she doesn't want to cry, right? So there's some indication of bravery there, right? Okay.
So
Yep.
we're also learning that Jack's observant in this time of terror. He can really focus on Anna.
Yeah, yeah. Ray, what else?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Jack, that, you know, doesn't feel like the, classic hero that you can give. He's kind of pitiful, but when you bring in Anna, then I care about Anna, and now I'm more invested in the story.
That's right, that's right. So, all right, anything else with this one?
Well, it leaves us not knowing what's gonna happen next.
No, that's right. And we don't really know what's going on with Jack, right? So one way to build conflict or build suspense is you can knock somebody out like you did, Jack, and people will not know, is he dead, is he not dead, what's going to happen next, right? In this particular version, depending upon whether you're an optimist or a pessimist, you can decide whether he's alive or he's dead, right? But we don't really know, right? We just left it there. So in the next version, we're hoping that the author is going to take you a little further, right? So, okay, so who would like to read version 7?
Jack Jones and his daughter Anna pass by a cave on their regular Sunday walk in the park. A gigantic, hairy, green monster comes out of the cave. Even from a distance, he smells like rotten eggs. The monster races out of the cave and scoops up Anna with one arm. He takes her back into the cave. Jack chases after Anna and goes into the cave. A steel door closes behind Jack, trapping him in the cave with the monster. The stench in the cave is unbearable. The monster roars at Jack. Jack takes out his Glock and fires a round at the monster. The bullet drops off the monster like it was a pebble. The monster drops Anna to the ground. Jack thinks she's terrified, but she's also trying not to cry. The monster rushes toward Jack. Jack fires the remaining rounds at the monster. They have no effect. The monster picks Jack up off the ground and throws him at the wall, knocking him out. Moments later, Jack wakes to the monster hovering over Anna in the corner of the cave. Jack picks up a dagger-shaped rock and rushes toward the monster. He stabs the monster in the eye, and the monster dies. The end.
Okay, so what works and what doesn't work about this particular one? More conflict?
Like a sense of smell.
We added another sense of smell. That's true. What else?
And sound.
Yeah.
Increase conflict.
We increase conflict because
It's right up to the
Jack
monster.
comes right up to him. But why does it fall apart?
The ending isn't right.
The ending is not right, right? Why is the ending not right?
Well, it's not believable for one thing.
It's not believable.
Stabs him in the eye, that doesn't kill him, but it should continue, the fight should continue at that point.
Yeah, so when we get to this big crisis and climax, right, it kind of goes by in 1 second, and it's basically ended, and it's over. And so what we're doing is we're trying to build the whole scene up towards the crisis and climax, right, which is Jack going to win and save his daughter or not, right? And then when we get to that point, we basically don't go slow enough, which is another real issue in many, many scenes, right, in that people will write through, especially a difficult emotion or a difficult part of the scene very quickly, because they, as writers, are in some ways uncomfortable with that portion themselves, right? And so another piece of advice to you in terms of writing scenes is when you get to the really, really hard part, the part that is most emotional for you, the part that you have the most difficulty writing, slow down. And actually slow down to the point where you write almost way too much about that particular climax and crisis, and then you can always pull it out later on. Right? And so what we want to do is we want to make sure the reader experiences us, in this particular case, fighting with the monster, struggling with the monster, maybe winning, maybe not winning. You don't really know how it's going to go, right? And then having it resolve one way or the other. So let me ask you all a question. Does that resonate with you about writing the hard parts, that it's difficult to write the hard parts? Yeah. So I think probably one of my biggest lessons in writing all of these books was just learning to slow down for the really difficult emotional parts, right? Because we all, in some ways, we all have something that is a blind spot for us, right? And many of us choose to write about those things, and then when we actually get to the point where we want to write about them, we rush through them. So it's best, I think, to kind of just know what that place is, and then slow down. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's very unsatisfying to me as a reader when the crisis and the climax happen too fast.
Exactly.
I find in a lot of fiction that I read.
Exactly.
Not this fast, but still too fast.
Well, I mean, we're basically trying to exaggerate the whole process so that we have a one-page story, right? So, but you can imagine how you could turn this one page into a 20-page scene if you wanted to, right? And then even in the 20-page scene, many people will go too fast over the crisis and the climax portion. Okay? All right, the next version, we're on 8, right? Who would like to read version 8? Go ahead.
Jack Jones and his daughter Anna pass by a cave on their regular Sunday walk in the park. A gigantic, hairy green monster comes out of the cave. Even from a distance, he smells like rotten eggs. The monster races out of the cave and scoops up Anna with one arm. He takes her back into the cave. Jack chases after Anna and goes into the cave. A steel door closes behind Jack, trapping him in the cave with the monster. The stench in the cave is unbearable. The monster roars at Jack. Jack takes out his Glock and fires around at the monster. The bullet drops off the monster like it was a pebble. The monster drops Anna to the ground. Jack thinks she's terrified, but she's also trying not to cry. The monster rushes toward Jack. Jack fires the remaining rounds at the monster. They have no effect. The monster picks Jack up off the ground and throws him at the wall, knocking him out. Moments later, Jack wakes to the monster hovering over Anna in the corner of the cave.
Where is that version?
I know.
Did we lose it? I lost it. It's there?
Here it is.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Jack picks up a dagger-shaped rock and rushes toward the monster. He stabs the monster in the eye. Jack and the monster struggle for a time.
Wait, where are we?
Yeah, there we are.
Page 9.
On page 9,
So I was page 2.
Oh,
I don't have a
sorry.
sorry.
Okay.
Oh, it's on the left,
Is it-
page 10.
So we're continuing with version 8.
We're still on that version, yeah.
Okay.
Okay?
okay? The monster is weakened and falls to the ground. He crawls toward Anna and kisses her. The kiss enrages Jack, so he picks up a large boulder and readies himself to smash in the monster's head. Just as he's about to throw the rock, the monster transforms into Jack's dead wife, Mary. Jack can't believe his eyes. Mary, I thought you were dead. No, my love, the monster had me, but now I'm back with you. Jack puts the rock down and helps Mary up. They kiss. Anna joins them, and the three of them hug. They walk out of the cave, arm in arm.
All right, so what do we do in this particular version?
Their turns.
Say it again?
You give like a meaning, character, a purpose, everything to the monster.
Yeah. So say some more about what works and what doesn't work with this, if anything. Stop laughing.
I love this.
All right, so in terms of slowing down the climax, did we slow down the climax? Yes, we did, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now they're struggling for a time, right?
Yeah.
And then we actually did something else, which is we had the monster do something to enrage Jack even more, right? By kissing the daughter, right? So it was like, "Arr," right, so he's going to really go after. Okay, so then he basically goes after, and then what do? What happens? So the story's going this way, boom, 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 and then we turn, right? And so the big reveal, the big turn is, oh my God, the monster is really Jack's wife. And all his dead wife, who we didn't know was dead until just now, is all of a sudden alive, and they live happily ever after. Okay. So now what works? Does anything not work for folks?
Yeah, it doesn't work that all of a sudden this dead wife comes into play.
Exactly.
In my opinion.
Yeah. That, we have the same sense of novels, but you wait to the next version.
Why did holding the rock up, just holding it up, kill the monster?
Right.
What's the significance of that?
I don't know. Maybe I miswrote that. So it's possible it's a mistake. I think he was supposed to like smash him eventually, I guess. Oh no, he didn't. Not in this one. He doesn't because he basically he's about to smash, right? And then he doesn't do it because he sees that it's his wife. That's what happens. So I'm one version. I'm one version ahead.
Why did he transform? Why did the monster transform at that moment?
Well, that's what we're wondering, right? We don't know why the monster would transform into his wife at that moment, if in fact it really was his wife. If it was really his wife, why wouldn't she just do it right away, right? As soon as she saw him. So there's something. So what does that leave you with? It leaves you with a plot point that sounds suspicious, right? Right. And so what you're trying to do is, now they're normally not as obvious as this, but when you do a turn, you can do a turn two ways, right? The turn can essentially be a real turn. So you've changed the direction of the story and it really has turned. Or you can change the direction of the story and you can plant a seed that suggests maybe there's something fishy about this, right? And then in that case, we're going to find out what happens, okay? But the important point here is that we turned the story, and now we've turned the story, and sometimes you can turn a story and it can actually be completely believable, 100% convinced that it's going to happen, and then you can turn back, right? And sometimes that's actually not a bad way to go, but sometimes readers feel a little bit betrayed by that. So what they really want is if you're going to turn back, you turn, and then you plant a seed, right? So we've planted a seed here that might suggest we're going to turn back, and it's an obvious kind of seed, but if you're going to do it, you would do it in a way that is much less obvious, okay?
Can you say a little bit more about what you mean there?
So you can just plant a symbol. You can have something that might signify death, and in terms of where the story is going to go, or might signify that it's not truthful or whatever. You can basically have them say something that sounds a little suspicious, which is actually kind of what happened in this particular case. And the degree of which the degree is actually important. So in this case, the monster basically becomes the wife out of the blue and says, "Oh, I'm your wife and I've been gone and I love you," right? So it's very suspicious, right? But it doesn't have to be that suspicious, right? There could be a lot in that scene that would suggest that maybe it really is his wife, right? And then if you turn it back or not will depend upon how you want to take your story from there. So it's just about how you nuance the details there. Sometimes you can do it in a direct way, with less, sometimes with more, and then sometimes you can do it with symbols, sometimes you can do it with indirect dialogue. It just depends, right? It's all different ways of doing it that I personally prefer doing it in a really subtle way. So there's something called three-phase foreshadowing, and three-phase foreshadowing is basically the idea is that for people who are really, really into reading, say for example a George Martin novel, right? If you're into Game of Thrones, right? The people who are really into it would see a hint that it was going to go one way or the other very early in the story, right? And then there would be a second hint down the road that was more obvious that the vast majority of readers would pick up, and then it would actually happen down the road, right? So I tend to like that idea of three-phase foreshadowing because it really appeals to your readers who are really looking for a lot of detail, and then it also appeals to the readers who don't necessarily look for that much detail, and so you give them a bigger hint closer to the actual reveal. So, but the important point is just about doing foreshadowing. So, okay, did that make any sense, that three-phase foreshadowing bit? Okay. All right, what version are we on, 9? All right, who would like to read 9? Only 2 left, so. Okay, go ahead.
Jack Jones and his daughter Anna pass by a cave on their regular Sunday walk in the park. A gigantic, hairy green monster comes out of the cave. Even from a distance, he smells like rotten eggs. The monster races out of the cave and scoops up Anna with one arm. He takes her back into the cave. Jack chases after Anna and goes into the cave. A steel door closes behind Jack, trapping him in the cave with the monster. The stench in the cave is unbearable. The monster roars at Jack. He takes out his Glock and fires a round at the monster. The bullet drops off the monster like it was a pebble. The monster drops Anna to the ground. Jack thinks she's terrified, but she's also trying not to cry. The monster rushes toward Jack. Jack fires the remaining rounds at the monster. They have no effect. The monster picks Jack up off the ground and throws him at the wall, knocking him out. Moments later, Jack wakes to the monster hovering over Anna in the corner of the cave. Jack picks up a dagger-shaped rock and rushes toward the monster. He stabs the monster in the eye. Jack and the monster struggle for a time. The monster is weakened and falls to the ground. He crawls toward Anna and kisses her. The kiss enrages Jack, so he picks up a large boulder and readies himself to smash in the monster's head. Just as he's about to throw the rock at the monster transforms into Jack's dead wife, Mary. Jack can't believe his eyes. Mary, I thought you were dead. No, my love, the monster had me, but now I'm back with you. Jack puts the rock down and helps Mary up. They kiss. Anna joins them and the three of them hug. When Jack takes Mary's hand, he notices her pinky is still green.
Okay, so now a couple things here, right? How do we end this particular version?
Twist.
Say it again? There's no resolution, right? So it's somewhat of a cliffhanger. And so another thing you can do in scenes is you can go up the triangle right to the crisis/climax point, and then you can cut the scene and continue it in the next one, right? And so in a way, this idea that we have to follow the triangle in every scene is not entirely true. Sometimes you can basically cut the scene, have a cliffhanger, and then resolve it at the start of the next chapter or the next scene and do it that way. But conceptually, it's still the same thing. You still have to go up the triangle and then eventually kind of resolve it and come back down, right? So we're doing that. So we basically did what? We turned in one direction, right? And now we have introduced the possibility of turning in another direction, though we don't know, right? We've kind of confirmed the suspicion that maybe it's not really Jack's wife, and that we're going to basically find out what's going on. The other thing that we did that is a little bit more nuanced, this is kind of a combination of this version and the last version, is that we went up the triangle to the crisis point, right, climax point, where Jack's holding the rock and he's about to basically kill the monster. Even though it may not be realistic that you can kill the monster with a rock, but you suspend your disbelief, right? Okay, and so we're right at the peak, and then what we do is we come back down the triangle because we basically introduce this turn, which says, oh, maybe he doesn't have to kill him, maybe it's his wife, right? And now we're going to come back up, right? So in some more nuanced scenes, you go up a triangle, you turn, which actually de-escalates the tension a little bit, and then you turn back again and re-escalate or escalate again the tension until you get to the real climax. So in some ways, the climax where he's holding the rock over the head is a false climax, right? And then we turn it at the last minute. Okay, does that make sense? Anything else in this one? Okay.
So that's that hint you were talking about.
The hint.
The pinky is still green. That's the hint you were talking about.
The pinky, well, and also just the fact that it was a little suspicious that all of a sudden, right, just as the monster's about to get killed, I'm your wife, right? So, so that's a little suspicious. But now we've actually gotten the next hint of confirming that the monster really is still, the monster is the monster, right? Mm-hmm. All right, last version, version 10. Anybody want to read this one? Assuming I can find it. Oh, there it is. Okay.
I'm happy to read it again if nobody else is interested.
Anybody who wants to go?
Jack Jones and his daughter Anna pass by a cave on their regular Sunday walk in the park. A gigantic, hairy, green monster comes out of the cave. Even from a distance, he smells like rotten eggs. The monster races out of the cave and scoops up Anna with his arm. He takes her back into the cave. Jack chases after Anna and goes into the cave. A steel door closes behind Jack, trapping him in the cave with the monster. The stench in the cave is unbearable. The monster roars at Jack. Jack takes out his Glock and fires a round at the monster. The bullet drops off the monster like a pebble. The monster drops Anna to the ground. Jack thinks she's terrified, but she's also trying not to cry. The monster rushes toward Jack. Jack fires the remaining rounds of at the monster. They have no effect. The monster picks Jack up off the ground and throws him into the wall, knocking him out. Moments later, Jack wakes. The monster's hovering over Anna in the corner of the cave. Jack picks up a dagger-shaped rock and rushes toward the monster. He stabs the monster in the eye. Jack jumps. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, I always have a problem on those transition pages like that. There it is.
Sorry about that. Suspense.
Yeah, right.
Page
Jack.
13.
Yeah, I got it, thanks. Jack and the monster struggle for a time. The monster is weakened and falls to the ground. He crawls toward Anna and kisses her. The kiss enrages Jack, so he picks up a large boulder and readies himself to smash in the monster's head. Just as he's about to throw the rock at the monster transforms into Jack's dead wife, Mary. Jack can't believe his eyes. Mary, I thought you were dead. No, my love, the monster had me, but now I'm back with you. Jack puts the rock down and helps Mary up. They kiss, Anna joins them, and the three of them hug. When Jack takes Mary's hands, he notices her pinky's still green. He pulls back. Mary transfers into the monster again. The monster runs to the corner of the cave and gets a large butcher knife. Sorry. With all his strength, Jack picks up a large rock and rushes toward the monster. He throws it at him, knocking the monster to the ground. He picks up the butcher knife and repeatedly slashes and stabs the monster until the monster is dead. Jack and Anna look for another way out of the cave. They see a ray of light at the far end. They clear rocks away until an escape hole is large to pass through. They exit the cave. Jack takes Anna's hand and tells her he loves her. I love you too, Daddy. Right after, Anna begins to scream and hold her stomach. Jack screams too. He pulls up Anna's shirt. Something is moving under her skin. Jack pulls up his shirt. Something is moving underneath his shirt too.
Okay, so what did we do here in this last version?
Set up the next scene.
We set up the next scene for sure. What else did we do?
You gave
Resolved that one.
We resolved. So we basically had the conflict now play out for a while, kind of go up, go down, finally resolve with he gets out of there with his daughter. Monster is dead, not his wife after all, right? So we know that. We have a little problem in that they can't go back from the way they came because of the metal door, so they have to look for another way out. So we find this little wonderful light, right? Dig out that way. We get out. We could have just ended there, right? If you want to basically have the story end there and not have any follow-on scenes, then you just end it right there. But what we're doing is we're injecting something. Your stomach, something's crawling around in the stomach, probably from the fact that there was a kiss, but who knows, right? Who knows exactly why, right? And so that basically sets up the start of the next scene, right?
It reminds me of Stranger Things.
Stranger Things, there you go. So I have not seen Stranger Things, so it's like, but that's good. So, okay, so how did that sound? How did that work for everybody? Does that give you a better understanding of what it means to do a scene? Okay, so remember, the triangle is king, right? So if you're going to write a scene, make sure you follow the triangle. By the way, you can follow the triangle for the whole book too, right? So when you basically think about an inciting incident for a book, then you run it through many, many, many scenes, eventually it'll have a climax to the overall book, right? And so scenes to work well just have to have kind of mini crises, mini climaxes, and then they have to build over time toward the main and central crisis and climax of the book, right? So, and then they resolve. All right, so one of the hardest things about scenes is the next slide. And these are called value shifts. And the reason that they're hard is that a lot of people will write a scene and there won't be any real value shift. It starts off happy, it ends happy, there's no real change in the character. When that happens, fundamentally, there's really no reason to have the scene in the first place. You could probably just cut it. Many, many scenes are written that way, right? And so another thing you can do after you follow the triangle and after you go through writing your scene is say, what's the value shift? So in this particular one, value shifts are things like hope to fear, love to hate, but there's a million different ways to think about it. And other people like to use this plus-minus system. So if the scene starts off and the feelings are relatively positive, you give it 1 plus. It's super, super positive. Two lovers walking hand in hand, completely in love, about to get married, maybe you give it 2 pluses, right? So you can always go from plus to minus, minus to plus, plus to plus plus, minus to minus minus. You can go through all the combinations. But you have to have a value shift. If you don't have a value, so in this particular scene, let's talk about the value shift. When they first are walking, just on their normal Sunday stroll, before they see the monster, right? What would you say their mood is?
Plus.
Plus, right? And so what is, it's kind of a loving father-daughter, beautiful day, walking in the park, right? So whatever words you want to use, you can say that as loving father-daughter relationship, something like that, right? Then the value shifts when we basically see the monster come, right? And so the monster comes and takes her. So we go to what then? Fear? Say it again?
Negative.
Yeah. So it's definitely negative, but what word would you associate with it?
Threat.
Threat, right? Fear, right? So then when the guy runs away, he's still afraid, but it just doesn't end the scene in a reasonable way, right? So let's take the last version now, and we kind of go through it, through all the conflict stuff. You don't know what's going to happen, and there's tension there, and there's fear there, and you're basically hoping for the best, but you don't really know, right? And then it resolves in the positive scene, when it resolves without the stuff crawling around in your stomach, right? It comes back to a positive place, right? But it's not exactly the same feeling that you would have had when they were walking in the park, right? So the innocence has gone away, right? They've gone through this big struggle, right? So it's kind of calm and peacefulness without innocence or something like that, right? So some value shift that way, right? And so it's a little bit different than it was in the beginning, even though it's positive then, you went through all of this negative stuff, right? And what I've chosen to do in this particular scene is I start it positive, right? And I'm clearly ending in a negative place when they kind of freak out about what's in their stomach, right? So there's a clear value shift from the beginning to the end of the scene. So value shifts are hard just because there's so many different ways to talk about, how somebody's feeling in the beginning of a scene and how somebody's feeling at the end. But if you just remember plus to minus, minus to plus, plus plus to, plus, minus, minus to minus, that kind of thing, it works out fine. Okay, so what I want you to do now for 1/2 hour is split into 2 groups, and I want you to use the triangle, and I want you to write scene number 2 to this story, just a 1-page scene, right?
As a group already.
As a group, you're going to do it together, and then have one person as the spokesperson, basically, who will report out at 12 o'clock, okay? So you're starting off with basically stuff's going around in each of their stomachs. What are they going to do, right? And then I want you to come back and tell me. Okay, so you see where everybody understand what's being requested? Right, so everybody have a pen. And you can just use the, I don't know, if you have some paper, or we have extras of these, I think, if people need paper, or you can just write it down. Just all you really need to do is bullets, right? So we don't need any kind of detail thing. I just want you to think about, I'm writing a scene that's following the triangle. So the inciting incident, in some ways, we know what the inciting incident is, right? The inciting incident is these people have got these things crawling around in their stomach, right? So we need some conflict going up. We need a crisis, climax. Kind of we already even know what we want the crisis question to be, are they going to get these things out of their stomach or not, right? Yes, they do, or yes, they don't, or they don't, right? And then the resolution is, you know, whatever you want it to be. All right, so can, like, let's see how many we got, 2, yeah, maybe like this half of the room goes sit in a circle there, and this half of the room go sit in a circle there and work on that for a little while, and then we'll talk about it.
How do you want them to deal with it? I mean, what would you do if you had them? Would you like try to act normal? Oh, it's nothing, we're probably nervous, or what would you do immediately?
Well, if these things came out, then that could be the building of subsequent scenes, right? So,
Why don't we, we're kind of struggling, kind of coming up with a resolution, and why don't we kind of develop the conflict to see where it takes us? How would you react if you're in that situation, and all of a sudden you saw something coming out? You know, what would the people, what would the action be, and that will take us, I think.
They are out of the cave, so they exited.
Yeah, they're out of the cave.
So I imagine they're like on a sidewalk or something like that when they discover it.
All right, so they discover, what are they, green things coming out of their body or under their
Well,
skin? Huh?
something is moving under their skin.
Under their skin.
Would these things get bigger?
So,
Would these things grow in size? Would they,
well, that sure would
So-
increase conflict.
would they crawl out of their mouth?
Would they be put under quarantine if they go tell someone about it? Would they go for help knowing that that could happen?
does it hurt? Is it, I mean, is it life-threatening?
Yeah,
Is
does it hurt, exactly.
Does it hurt? What would you do in that case? Would you run somewhere to get help? I would think, maybe,
Yeah.
right?
I think so.
So,
I looked
okay.
down and saw something crawling under my skin. I think I would try to go
Right,
find.
action, okay.
I would start running somewhere.
What is the action? The daughter starts to whimper or whatever.
You might scream too.
Rush over to help.
I'd be back in the car, maybe a dog comes up and sniffs her, or.
Let's leave the sniffing out.
Well,
Well, good.
Or a little child comes up and is curious, or a policeman just comes up and says, thinks
Some
Jack is abusing.
authority figure.
But why not, why not Anna
That would be
stopping
very good
screaming?
rising action.
Why not Anna, okay, gets a hold of herself, and they start to figure out what a resolve is? They start to talk about it, because now you're still staying in that going up, because you still gotta resolve that conflict, you haven't resolved it.
Right, but we haven't even built the conflict yet, right? So
Well, the
Anna's-
conflict is them, what's in their stomach.
It's just between them, is that what you're saying?
What if we put a time limitation on, so they bump into a police officer who's familiar with all of this, you know, can make sense of it. And then he says, if you're not cured within the next 10 minutes, you're gonna turn into monsters, and then we're gonna have to shoot you or something, you know, I mean, make sense. So now we have to cure this thing in 10 minutes, how are we gonna do it? And maybe there's somebody there, they get the doctor or something who has to, I don't know, I mean, something along that
haven't you
line.
rushed through it?
What's
Isn't
that?
You're bringing in the emotion and you're rushing through it?
Well, I'm trying to make,
I guess to me that's rushing through it.
Looking woman comes up to them, and she could either be working for the monsters or for the healers. Because she says, you know, I work with plants, and I work with.
well, she could be a witch, that's it.
Yeah.
Well, but is she a good witch or a bad witch, right? She could be a witch, but.
Well, we don't know if she's good or bad, so we increase the
So since
tension.
we've got monsters in here, Anna's screaming brings along this.
Okay, so how was that process for everybody? Did you have fun? Okay, so we're going to have 2 quick report outs, and then we're going to finish up for the day. So what group would like to go first? Them. And who is the spokesperson? Who is the spokesperson from? You are? Okay. Well,
Am I going first?
Apparently you're going first.
This is a really lively discussion. I don't know about you guys. We went all over the place. So we came up with, they're both fearful. And Jack is dead. He's trying to calm Anne down, but she keeps screaming.
Then this really strange older man on a walker with holes in his clothes. He's dumb, he can't talk.
Cool. I like this.
He comes along and he starts to touch Anna, puts his hands on her belly and on her hair, and Jack freaks out and he pushes him down, and Anna's face is starting to contort and turn a little green. She's got a little bit of green strands in her hair. And then Jack and the older man sort of lock eyes, and the older man is trying to say something, but he's dumb. And as Jack's staring into his eyes, he sees his father, and he helps the old man up.
Cool. Cool. Great. All right. Nice. That was great.
Does he
Okay.
have a mask like in, what was Star Wars?
So as you think about your story, we start off. What did you consider to be the pieces of conflict rising?
That was the hardest. That was where.
Her being calmed down, him trying to play the father figure and calming her down.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's another person entering.
Yeah. So that adds tension, right?
That's going to add tension.
And he's touching Anna.
And then he touches her.
Which adds tension,
Which adds a lot
right?
of tension, and Jack's reaction to that.
Cool.
As well.
That's good. So what was the crisis question and what was the climax?
The crisis question. Oh,
The question is open-ended still, because
Okay.
we don't know.
We don't know what's going to happen yet,
Right.
right?
We don't
So you're basically deferring that to another scene, right? So
yes.
but you're setting it up,
And the climax too.
right? So, okay, cool, great. Let's hear the other
So
group.
what was the I didn't get what the crisis
They're
was.
they're deferring it. They're basically
they're
they're
deferring
they're
the
basically
crisis
working
too.
on conflict
building
rise.
tension.
They're building tension, and they're going to get to that point down the road where
And they have a turn because the old man is the father.
they
No, Jack sees his father.
he sees his father.
In his eyes. The old man is reminding Jack of his father.
Oh, I missed that, yeah.
Yeah, so it leaves that question there. So cool.
Can I ask a question? Is it each scene has to have a plus and minus?
Yep.
Okay,
Uh,
each scene, not just the whole book.
Not just the whole book. Each scene has to. What happens is that if you don't do that, if two lovers are walking hand in hand, right, and everything's happy at the start of the scene, and they're doing the same exact thing at the end of the scene, why do you need the scene, right? So just ask yourself that question: what is the value shift in the scene, and do I really need it? And I'll talk a little bit later about how I kind of teach one-on-one and teach different classes, but I cannot tell you how many folks have come in and written a scene where I just said, delete it, like you don't really need it. So, okay, let's hear the other story.
Yeah, I just say that there were so many good ideas flying. Every time I got halfway through one sentence, I had to do another one. They were just it just kept coming. It was great. Fighting panic, Jack presses against Anna's belly, which rises over moving bumps. Anna screams louder with panic and then faints. Jack picks her up and runs for the road for help, where cars pass without stopping. Finally, an elderly lady stops in a wood-paneled wagon. Jack pushes Anna into the back seat and climbs in beside her and shouts, "Get us to the hospital." Jack turns to Anna and quietly says, "Everything's gonna be all right." The driver studies Jack in the mirror and asks, "What happened? What's wrong?" Before he can answer, he notices the bottom of the driver's earlobe is green. As the car begins to move, Jack throws open the door and pulls Anna out into the dust.
Cool, great, nice job.
We couldn't decide whether it was the ear or the finger.
Yeah.
5 minutes.
So, one final point about scenes. A lot of times in a scene, you will take things only so far because you believe it's not believable or people are not going to resonate with it. And sometimes that's actually true, right? Sometimes you can really go too far, but I actually see the other problem much more often, which is that people don't go far enough. They don't really think about enough conflict. They don't throw enough obstacles in kind of the face of the protagonist, and therefore the scene isn't realized in a way that has its full potential. So just think about that as you're actually writing your scenes. Am I throwing every possible rational, reasonable obstacle in this person's face that I can? And more often than not, you'll add a few. Now, neither group had that problem, which is great, but it is a general thing to think about as you actually work on your scenes. Okay, so I think that is it. Was this helpful to folks? Did it work out okay?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. All right, so I have little things for you. These are bookmarks with my new book there, per se. These are business cards. I will pass them around. I think there's enough for everybody. So just take one of those. And I think, I don't know, I'll just give you all of them. They'll probably,
Do you read full manuscripts?
yeah. So I'll tell you what else I do is, I'll just wait 1 second. So I do a couple of things. With Seven Bridges, basically, I teach a class in the fall. It's kind of an introductory fiction class. It's 10 weeks, 3 hours, basically, per week. I also do one-on-one consulting. I do manuscript work, and I teach a class called Story, basically, which is a whole full year MFA level class that typically runs from January until December, so the next one would start up in January. So if any of you are interested in any of those classes, you can just basically contact me there. If you're interested in the fall class, you just go right through Paula. If you are interested in any of my books, they're at the back there. Please go take a look at them if you're interested. And I think that's it. Thank you very much for your time. Okay? All right, sure.
So thanks for coming. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Usually I ask as folks are leaving, you can give me some feedback. It's helpful for us as we think about programming for next year. And we are currently working on programming for next year. I've been in the process of being in touch with folks. So if you have suggestions for craft topics that you would like to see, please feel free to either tell me or shoot us an email, because we are in the process of working on that right now. Also, we just opened up registrations for our creative writing groups that meet in 10-week chunks, and so our next session that's happening from the end of March through May is going on. We opened it up on the 12th, Wednesday, and by Thursday, 4 of the groups are already full. But we do have a couple of spaces left in 2 of the groups, so if folks want to, look for that on the website. But thanks for coming. Feel free to grab some food. Feel free to donate, and hopefully we'll see you in March.
Which 2 are still open a little?
The Tuesday AM group in Lancaster and the Wednesday evening group in Worcester still have space. But you already registered for a group, Renee. You're in.
Did I get in the Friday?
Yes, yeah. You're in your group.
Okay, good.
Thanks for coming.